let's be real, nobody gets excited about data backups. It's that thing on your to-do list that you're always going to get to later. But here's the thing. In today's world, a good backup isn't just IT housekeeping. It is literally the difference between a really bad day and your business completely shutting down. So let's dive in and build your last and, honestly, your most important line of defense. We're starting with this because, well, it says it all. This isn't some consultant's opinion. This is a top official at the U.S. Cybersecurity Agency, CISA, laying it out in black and white. When the worst happens, the one single thing that separates the companies that make it from the ones that don't is a good offline backup. The stakes just couldn't be any higher. All right, let's talk about the modern boogeyman, ransomware. You have to understand, this isn't just some random virus. It is a sophisticated, weaponized tool designed to bring a business to its knees. And to beat it, you first have to understand how it thinks. And this is the key. You have to think of modern ransomware like a digital wildfire. It's designed to find and spread to absolutely every connected resource it can. You know, that super convenient cloud drive that's always synced, or that USB backup drive that's been plugged into your server for, 6 months? Well, they're no longer assets. They become liabilities. They're actually the first things to get locked up, making them totally useless right when you need them the most. So if the enemy's strategy is to encrypt everything it can see, the solution is actually pretty simple, but incredibly powerful. You have to create a backup that it can't see. And that brings us to the ultimate weapon in this fight, the offline, or what we call an air-gapped backup. So here it is, the fundamental difference. Your online backup is super convenient, right? It's always on, but that constant connection is also its greatest weakness. An offline backup, because it's physically disconnected, is literally invisible to an attacker on your network. That small, deliberate act of unplugging the drive, that tiny bit of inconvenience, that is the very thing that makes it secure. Okay, so how do you actually do this? For a small business, or even just for you personally, it can be as simple as using the tools already built into your computer, like Mac Time Machine or Windows Backup. The key, the absolute critical step, is physically unplugging that drive when the backup is done. And here's a pro tip. Have 2 drives that you rotate. That way you're never left exposed if one fails. For bigger companies, the principle's the same, but the tools are, a bit more heavy-duty. Services like CrashPlan, Veeam, or Rubrik can automate this whole process, creating secure, isolated copies of your data at a massive scale. Okay, so you've got your offline lifeline. You're safe, right? Well, not so fast. Having a backup is one thing. Knowing for a fact that it actually works is something else entirely. An untested backup really isn't a plan. It's just a hope. It's a prayer. And this little story is so important because it reframes the whole problem. Testing backups isn't just some boring task for the IT department. It is a core business survival issue. When a CEO gets it, when they make this a top priority, it signals a huge shift in mindset. It goes from being a procedure to being about survival. The question from the top has to be, have we proven we can recover from this? The key here is making this a regular, disciplined process, a routine. Your most valuable data, the stuff you absolutely cannot live without, that might need to be tested daily or at least weekly. For everything else, you can rotate through your backups on a monthly basis. But at least once a quarter, a real human being should be manually putting eyes on them, just to make sure everything looks exactly as it should. Now, manually checking every single file, that's impossible, right? So how can you automate this? The answer is an incredibly powerful tool called a cryptographic hash. The easiest way to think about it is like a unique digital fingerprint for your data. Every single file gets one, and it's mathematically unique to the exact contents of that file. So here's how it works. You take 2 documents, and they have the exact same content, down to the last byte. When you run them through a hashing tool, this one uses SHA-256, they produce an identical string of characters. You see? A perfect match. This is your proof. If the fingerprints match, the file hasn't been touched. But now, look at this. This is the magic part. We make a tiny, tiny change, just deleting 2 letters. The resulting hash? It's completely different. It has absolutely no resemblance to the original. That's the power of this. It gives you an instant automated way to know that not a single bit of your data has been changed or corrupted. It flags the problem long before it becomes a crisis. So, having a working backup, that's the technical solution. Now we have to connect it to the business. And that means answering some really tough questions about what your organization can actually handle when things go sideways. First step is your recovery time objective, or RTO. Now, this isn't about how quickly you'd like to be back up and running. It's about how quickly you must be. Is it a day? 8 hours? 1 hour? This single number will basically dictate everything about the kind of recovery system you need to build. Next is the recovery point objective, or RPO. This one's all about data loss. So if your last backup was from 6 hours ago, that means you've just lost 6 hours of work. Can your business live with that? Or do you need to back up every hour, maybe even every 15 minutes? This question defines how much data you're willing to sacrifice forever. And finally, we have the maximum tolerable downtime, or MTD. This is the big one. This is the absolute final deadline. It includes everything: the time it takes to figure out there's a problem, to get the team together, and to actually perform the recovery. This is your breaking point, the moment before the business suffers catastrophic, maybe even irreversible damage. Once you have those metrics defined, now you can build your playbook. This is your disaster recovery plan. It's the step-by-step guide you're going to follow when the alarms are ringing and everything feels like chaos. A huge part of that plan is deciding where you're going to recover. And this is a direct trade-off between speed and money. A hot site is a live, running replica of your entire system. Recovery is almost instant, but as you can guess, it's the most expensive option by far. A warm site has all the hardware ready to go, but you still need to load your data, so recovery takes a few hours. And then there's a cold site, which is basically just an empty room with power. It's the cheapest, but getting back online can take days. Your RTO and your budget will tell you which one you need. Now, it's really easy to think, hey, I'm in the cloud, I'm covered. And while it's true that providers like AWS have amazing reliability, it is not foolproof. Entire geographic regions can and do go offline. A really solid plan accounts for this. Maybe you replicate your data to a completely different region, or you might even use a totally different cloud provider to avoid having a single point of failure. We've covered a lot of ground here, from the nitty-gritty of unplugging a drive all the way to high-level business strategy. The point is, you now have the fundamental building blocks you need to turn your organization from a potential victim into a truly resilient survivor. So let's just boil it all down. First, your single best defense is a good offline backup, period. Second, if you don't test that backup, you can't trust it. It's that simple. Third, you absolutely must know your recovery objectives before a disaster ever happens. And finally, remember that having a documented plan is what turns total chaos into a controlled, manageable process. Being prepared isn't an accident. It's an active choice you have to make. And that really just leaves us with one final thought. The worst has happened. The emergency playbook is open on the table. When you look at your team, are you ready to turn that page?